Animation is very interesting to me. The things you can do with animation are vastly higher than what you can do with live action. I actually think that is why the Disney live action remakes are terrible. Uh, they're just unique, colorful, magical stories inside of animation that a lot of the time can't be translated to live action. So, without further ado, let's get into my favorite animated movies. Starting off with some honorable mentions. I think that Beauty and the Beast is probably my favorite of the classic Disney animated movies. It's very well made and all of the characters are extremely likable. It's also just beautifully animated. And then Batman Under the Red Hood is probably the best DC animated film of all time. I think the Dark Knight Returns 2 movies are pretty great too, but I think this one really takes the cake. Toy Story 4, contrary to some people's opinions, I really liked. It was a movie that going into it, everybody kind of thought that it was unnecessary, but coming out after seeing all of the character storylines, specifically Woody wrapped up, and some incredible animation and story, I think we all realized, at least most of us, that it was pretty great that they made this. And then finally, Inside Out, which was a really huge surprise for me, but I really enjoy this movie, and the characters really brought the movie up really high for me. Coming in at number 10, we have the Lego Movie. Yeah, I was extremely surprised by this movie. I think that this movie is so good and is one of the most surprising movies of the 2010s. Until we got a trailer for this movie back in 2013, I don't think a Lego Movie really stood out to anybody. Sort of feels like big product placement in the movie, and it might be, but it is incredible. Chris Pratt voices the character of Emmett, who is extremely likable and honestly really funny. And we also have Lucy and Batman, who are pretty awesome characters as well. The latter ended up getting his own animated movie, which was also pretty good. And overall, it's just a pretty awesome movie. And then at number 9, we have The Incredibles. This is the greatest Fantastic Four movie. Brad Bird is such a great director. He gives one of the best Pixar movies, and this and another one that's higher on the list. The Incredibles is just one of the most feel-good movies. It's just an incredibly entertaining movie, and Syndrome was also just a really great villain, and is one of the only villains that fits into that big fan of the main character but gets rejected idea. And I didn't mind the sequel, but I thought it was a big disappointment compared to this one. But yeah, all the characters are just really great. Coming in at number 8, we have Shrek 2. This movie is actually pretty hilarious. Shrek and Donkey are both absolutely phenomenal characters and are probably in some of my top 10 favorite animated characters of all time. I really enjoyed this movie and the original, and I think that the other characters like Fiona, Puss in Boots, and the Gingerbread Man are just all really great. And I think that it is just overall a pretty awesome movie, and I really enjoyed it. And it's one of the few movies that I would say is better than the first. Coming in at number 7, we have The Lion King. Wow, what is left to say about this movie? I think it is probably the number 2 animated movie of all time, but this is my favorites list, not the best movies of all time. I'll get to what I think is number 1 in a bit, but anyway, with this movie, I think that Simba is another one of the best animated film characters, and I think that the emotion that the story has and the just incredible animation that they have throughout this movie, and just all the characters, and Scar's one of the best movie villains of all time. I think it just translates to be one of the greatest animated movies of all time. Coming in at number 6, we have the original Toy Story. I really wish that I could put this movie higher because I love the Toy Story franchise. It's probably one of my favorite animated franchises and maybe one of my favorite actual franchises of all time. I think that Woody and Buzz are both phenomenal characters, and multiple other characters like Rex or the Potato Head are just also really great. And I think that the idea of toys coming to life is extremely interesting and gives tons of possible storylines that they managed to execute fantastically through this Toy Story 2, 3, and 4. And I think that Sid is an extremely funny but also really threatening and scary villain to our main characters. And oh yeah, it gave us Pixar. Coming in at number 5, we have Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. I know, I know. I feel like a lot of people are going to wish I put this higher, and I do too. There's just other movies that I also really love. But I think Miles Morales is an awesome character who really should go to live action, and I wouldn't be surprised if they introduced him really soon. I also loved Peter Parker, Kingpin, and the Prowler, and all of them are just completely awesome characters. The soundtrack and direction was also very good, the soundtrack being one of the only movie soundtracks that I actually listened to for a long time, and just the animation with it became one of the most comic book films of all time, which I also really loved and stands among the likes of Scott Pilgrim vs. the World as one of the most comic book movies of all time. At number 4, we have Spirited Away. The word wow was what was popped in my head during and after watching this movie. I think it was an extremely interesting movie that was very existential and probably one of the most mature kids films of all time. It can also cause an interesting conversation, and the animation in this movie is definitely a standout and might give some of the greatest animation of all time. Though I don't think the characters are incredible, I think that the profound story and animation just bring this film up to the top of some of my favorite animated movies. And that movie that I said was the best animated movie of all time, I think that this movie is it. Real quick, I want to take a moment to tell you about my Letterboxd. I only have 7 subscribers, so this is obviously not sponsored, but we aren't getting a lot of movies now. The movies are starting to come back up, so there aren't going to be a ton of movie reviews and stuff like that. So I use Letterboxd to put out all of my movie reviews, and it also can kind of give you an idea of some of the more upcoming stuff that I have based off of what I'm watching. For example, right now I'm trying to watch as many 2020 movies as I possibly can because I will be doing an Oscars prediction and then maybe even an Oscars reaction as it airs. I think it'll just be a really great thing for everybody to come check out, and it's an extremely well done app for movie fans. Coming in at number 3, we have Fantastic Mr. Fox. Wes Anderson's most family film is such a masterpiece. I love Spirited Away, but right here, there's a huge jump to this. This movie is, for one, hilarious. I feel like every single joke lands, and the voice acting is also just phenomenal. Wes Anderson's directing just really works so well, and you can really feel a Wes Anderson movie. This movie desperately needs a rewatch by me because I just haven't seen it in quite a long time, but I really want to watch it again and again and again. I also just find this film extremely interesting. Coming in at number 2, we have Toy Story 3. Yeah, this placement may surprise you, but Toy Story 3 is my favorite of the Toy Story movies. I don't know how controversial that may be, but I do know that Toy Story 3 definitely has a lot of fans. It seems like Toy Story has more though, but maybe not. But I just find this movie to be absolutely incredible. From having funny moments to having sad moments to having epic moments, I really just felt like it all worked really well together. The animation is a massive jump up from the earlier Pixar movies, and it really just worked extremely well with this movie. Lotso is probably my favorite animated movie antagonist of all time, at least in the top 5. And Woody is probably one of my favorite protagonists in movies and animated movies, obviously. So just what a phenomenal movie. My number 1 favorite animated movie of all time is Ratatouille. I'm going to try to keep this one short because if I could, I'd talk about it for quite a long time, and I really don't have to edit that long. Ratatouille is easily my favorite animated movie of all time. It actually used to be in my top 10 favorite movies of all time. I believe it's in my top 15 right now and very close to the top 10. I think that Ratatouille is just extremely interesting. I don't understand how they came up with the idea for this, but the story is just so good, and I also think that the characters in this movie are just extremely likable. It's endlessly rewatchable, and you just want these characters to win so bad at everything that they do. There's so many scenes in this movie that can be analyzed down to the smallest bit, and this movie really deserves to be watched the best way you can with a big screen. And yeah, I love this movie. So those are my top 10 favorite animated movies of all time. Tell me yours down below, and be sure to follow me on Letterboxd, Instagram, and Twitter, and go and subscribe and like down below. See you guys.